Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Windows. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we'll be focusing on the future of the economy and the environment in Egypt and in the Middle East in general, as we are focusing today on the smart, the green, the environment-friendly projects that serve the economy. And I'm honored to be having with me over the program for tonight Dr. Moataz Abu Zeid, the Professor of Public Law. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on Windows. I would like to ask first, what is the importance of having projects that are friendly to the environment, that are smart, that are green for the future of Egypt?
Yes, of course, it's a very good introduction from you to our topic today. Of course, it's very important that firstly we must mention that Egypt has a lot of agendas and a lot of plans and strategies till 2030, till 2050 about the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And of course, Egypt on its road to achieve these targets and objectives. One of its main roads for this achievement is the combating the consequence of the climate change, and of course to preserve the environment and saving the biodiversity, and of course inventing or looking for new ways of clean sources of energy.
Yes.
Of course, one of these sources is the green hydrogen and the green ammonia and all the alternatives of the combustive fuel. Of course, it can now take place in the strategies of Egypt for the upcoming years, and I think it's a great awareness for the government and of course for the people as well to have this initiative, not only to achieve the goals of the sustainable development, but of course to serve the Egyptian economy as well.
You mentioned the goals of the Sustainable Development for the United Nations, and I think there are about 17 goals of them. How do you see the progress of Egypt in achieving those goals?
Of course, Egypt was one of the first countries all over the world took part in drawing the roadmaps of achieving these goals. This number one. Number two, during its process or its strategy to achieve these goals, Egypt became the last year one of the flag friendship countries for the UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program.
Yes.
And of course, this is a great progress for a country in the Middle East, one of the countries that suffered a lot from problems of population, problems of pollution, problems of energy resources to take this place. And of course, one of the evidence of this new place of Egypt all over the world was reserved by organizing the COP27 last year.
The COP27 you mentioned was organized here in the month of November of last year. What is the importance or the significance of having such an important event taking place here in Egypt, and more specifically in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Firstly, as we all understood, firstly that it depended upon the diplomatic and the historical weight of Egypt in this region, in the Middle East or in the Arabian region. But of course, when it was a real in front of our eyes, of course, we realized that it gave us new hopes and gave us new vision for Egypt in this place, not only for the historical and economic weight and the diplomatic efforts to organize such an important conference. But of course, on the other hand, we proved for the whole world that we have a vision for saving the planet Earth from the harms and the dangers of the climate change. Of course, it was a very successful conference, and of course it cleared for the whole world that we have many challenges in this field, collecting funds, maybe saving the temperature of the earth, maybe encouraging new sources of energy, encouraging new green and environmental friendly project. Of course, it discussed a lot of topics and a lot of challenges for the climate change, not only for the weight or the experience of Egypt to organize such conferences.
Yes, the environmental friendly projects, as you mentioned, and the green economy projects that we have witnessed over the past few years. What is the importance of having such a theme to be saving both the environment and the economy at the same time?
Of course, you must have a plan or a strategy, especially nowadays, to save your economy, or to make a new vision or a new application for a better way to save your economic status or economic phase nowadays. And of course, it's a problem in many countries, not only in Egypt. But having the way to save this economy by environmental friendly projects or green economy projects, and looking for new energy resources, of course this will be a great success, not only for the economy but for the environment. As you said, it's nowadays a very essential and very great or a very important point, not only to save your treasures or save your assets, or to build a very good shape for your economy, or a very good practice for your economy. But of course, if you destroy the environment, on the other hand, you will not have new sources or new basis to make these sustainable economy projects. So of course, you must have a look for the environment and make it a way to save or to help you to achieve these achievements for your economy. On the other hand, the environmental friendly projects is very important, because it's nowadays can be described as a challenge between, or it's a competition between many countries, how to take more part about a good journey for these environmental friendly projects, or how to save your climate, how to save the planet Earth, or how to have this awareness, at least, to combat these problems of climate change. So this is a great importance, not only on the economic side but also on the environmental side, and for the sustainable vision for these economic and environmental projects.
What are the fields that we have witnessed over the past few years that are focusing on both sides of the balance, to be saving the environment, to be preserving the environment and the climate for the upcoming generations, and maintaining a healthy economic situation for the country and for the region as well?
Yes, of course, it was a very long journey. I think started from issuing the Constitution of Egypt, or the current Constitution of Egypt in 2014. Of course, this Constitution gave new concepts and new principles about saving the rights of upcoming generations, as you said, to open a new road for digital illiteracy, or to combat this digital illiteracy,
yes,
to look for new sources of energy, especially the renewable resources as wind and as water, or to decrease the consequences and dangers of the climate change, saving your natural resources as the Nile, as the agricultural wealth you have here in Egypt, and
yes,
to encourage more green spaces to be cultivated. So all these principles, or all these beliefs, was discussed or was issued in our new constitution. On the other hand, of course, the parliament also had his steps in this field by issuing new laws, or to put new legislations discussing these points, and to translate these principles in the constitution in a shape of new laws can be applied by the individuals and also by the governments. Another way that we must mention about the Egyptian government in this field, that the strategies and the initiatives of the Egyptian government in this place, which was very complementary for the legislations and the constitutional principles. I think like the initiative of Be Ready for the Green, which was issued or was announced even before the COP27, and of course many relations and many protocols and many achievements and successful projects that was signed and discussed in the COP27. And of course, after that, after the COP27, the new legislation that was issued by the parliament about the certificates and bonds of the carbon certificates to decrease or to encourage investments and new projects to decrease their consumption of the carbon and the consequence on climate change.
You've mentioned the resources of renewable energy here in Egypt. We should be preserving that and maintaining that for the future. But what about exporting those sources that we have and millions of tons of renewable energy sources that we could be exporting to Europe, for example? How do you see this prospect?
Of course, this is somehow difficult, or it's a great challenge for any country to take a decision for exporting these sources of energy, maybe to Europe or even to the neighborhood countries here in the Middle East.
Yes.
Firstly, it needs, as I said, a great amount of awareness for the importance of dealing with these renewable resources of energy. This is the first point. The second point, it needs a great amount of technology and a great amount of programs and a very progressive industrial field to help in these exporting activities. As you said, it's a very important issue, but also we can shed a light about the successful position for Egypt in the non-renewable sources of energy like natural gas. Of course, Egypt is nowadays a very important exporting center all over the world for natural gas, and of course natural gas opened a new way for Egypt, or opened a new project for Egypt to begin to look for the new hydrogen or green hydrogen source. And of course it is the fuel of the future, as they said, about having this great source of energy, and of course with a very low cost, and also saving the environmental dimensions by using this new source of energy.
We had an energy crisis here in Egypt until 2013 and the Terrorist Brotherhood Organization regime, as we did see before the 2013 revolution. How did you see the transformation that we have had under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in this field, in the field of energy in specific?
Yes, of course, it was a very hard situation, especially in 2013.
Yes.
It wasn't only a problem or a shortage of energy, but it was a real problem for the all in development and all activities of the government that can be used in industries, used in cultivation, and many other commercial transactions that can be done by the individuals or by the government. On the other hand, there wasn't any vision or any project for tomorrow or for the future, how to save or how to secure a certain source of energy if this challenge can be happened again, how to face this problem, or how can you solve it.
Yes.
So this made a very great problem that you can't face the current problem, and you haven't any plan to solve it in the future. But after 2014 and the beginning of the presidency period of Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, of course, a new agenda for the sources of energy was put, firstly, as we said, by putting a certain legislation or legislating frame for this field, and how to be used, and what is the role of the government, and what is the role of individuals, or how can to use this field to attract more investments.
Yes.
On the other hand, new strategies put by the government, and of course encouraged a lot by the president, by many initiatives that can be pushed by the Egyptian government to encourage the investment in this field, and on the other hand to look for new sources of renewable energy.
Yes, speaking of the new sources, you mentioned the green hydrogen, and that was an important topic at the COP27. It was thus discussed several times during the sessions of the COP27. Is this the future of energy for Egypt and the rest of the world?
Yes, of course, I agree with you that to call it the future of energy, because we must differentiate between having hydrogen as a source of energy and the green hydrogen as a source of energy serving the green economy.
Yes.
Of course, green hydrogen means that you can exclude the hydrogen as a source of energy with low cost and with to environmental damages or environmental danger to to be produced during this exclusion process for hydrogen. And that's why we called it green hydrogen, that we have the source of energy and we cannot harm the environment as well. Of course, this can be used by the natural gas, can be used by electricity, can be used by combustive fuel, but of course the best way to produce green hydrogen here in Egypt is using the natural gas, as we are a very good mean for this type or this kind of source of energy. And on the other hand, it's totally a new source of energy, so it needs, as I said, many studies, many technologies, many maybe new investment, or especially foreign investment to be put here in Egypt.
Yes.
And I think one of the very successful and promising investments in this field, that the Emirate investment in this field here in Egypt. And of course there was last year after the COP27 a very huge investment project for producing green hydrogen and the green ammonia, was firstly covered or funded by the UAE, and of course it was participated by the sovereign fund of Egypt.
Yes, following the 2013 revolution and under the tenure of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, how do you see the attractiveness of Egypt in terms of getting new investments from the outside world, from the Arab world, from the rest of the countries as well?
Yes, of course. After 2013, it was not only a revolution to change the political system here in Egypt, but of course it was a plan to save Egypt from a very hard position in the economic side, in the political side, and even in the security and military side. And of course, having the steps that was taken by the Egyptian government, led by His Excellency Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, firstly by combating terrorism and put a stable atmosphere here in Egypt, saving the lives of the Egyptians, and of course attracting more investments to Egypt. So to make this suitable atmosphere or suitable environment here in Egypt was the first step that must be achieved. After that, we must push a certain bunch of legislations to attract this environment, this investment, and on the other hand, to make it safe, that I'm not afraid, or I'm not feared anything about my investment, my money, my project here in Egypt. And
guarantees for
yes,
them.
of course.
Yes.
And this was presented in the law of investment in 2017, the law of small and micro prices in 2020. Of course, there was a new vision for the legislation to serve this new investment by producing or issuing these laws. On the other hand, to complete these steps, that as I said, the awareness of the individual and of course the awareness of the government to not only encourage investments or foreign investment, but especially that investments that can serve in the field of environment and saving the consequences of climate change.
Yes, and we have had certain agreements with different countries as well in this field, in the smart green projects, the friendly to the environment projects as well. How do you see the possibility of getting more investments in this field, to be getting smart, green projects, eco-friendly projects that could be serving the goals of sustainable development for the future?
Of course, this can be built upon many bases. Firstly,
Yes.
we can invest the very great weight and the very great history for the foreign affairs of Egypt. And of course, we have a very old and very stable diplomatic school or diplomatic strategy that is respected by many countries of the world, and
Yes.
can be successfully make these agreements and make these conventions between many countries and between Egypt and also, of course, the international organizations in this field. On the other hand, and besides the diplomatic efforts, Of course, as I think, if we appraising the awareness of people for the importance of projects that serve or save the environment or combating the consequences of climate change, of course, this will change the map of the new projects that can be invested or can be constructed here in Egypt, as we can make a wide spread for the cultivating projects, maybe the industrial projects, maybe, but depending on renewable resources or the green resources of energy nowadays was discovered. Of course, this can change the nature of this investment, and of course, we can have our road in the achievement of these environmental goals.
You mentioned the foreign policy portfolio under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri at the same time. How do you see the increase in relations that we have had with the African countries, with the Arab countries, with countries that have not seen a visible Egyptian president for decades? How do you see the improvement that we have had here over the past 8 to 9 years?
Yes, of course, it was one of the main goals or the main objectives of His Excellency Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to rebuild the bridges of cooperation between Egypt and, of course, with other Arabian countries or other African countries, gathering them under the umbrella of Egypt with all its history and all its position between all these countries. Firstly, by holding many conferences about youth and how to communicate these the new ideas in these countries under the encouraging and under the sponsorship of Egypt in these meetings and these gathering. And of course, on the other hand, many ways of cooperation Egypt presented, especially in the time of COVID-19 virus, and of course many aids and donations given by the Egyptian government to prove its role and to prove its position or its new position between these countries. Of course, as the maybe international fund and the international bank had many reports about Egypt encouraging its new economic plans and economic strategies, and saying that Egypt is a very promising atmosphere or a very promising environment and society for new investment and new economic growth. Of course, this makes Egypt one of the unique examples in the Arabian countries and also for the African one to be imitated or to be repeated in other countries. And of course, this encouraged many countries or many organizations to have new cooperation with Egypt and new international treaty serving these objectives that Egypt are looking for.
How do you see the importance of the foreign policy relations that Egypt has and Egypt has had over the past decade, for example, and the bilateral relations as well between Egypt and the Arab countries that have pushed to the success of the COP27 that we have had in November here of the past year in Sharm el-Sheikh? Because this year the COP28 will be held in the United Arab Emirates. So one in Africa, one in Asia, and they're both at the Arab world at the same time.
Of course, it's not the comparison is not limited between the COP27 was held in Egypt and the COP28 held in the United Emirates. But of course, we had a new an old hard comparison between COP27 was held in Egypt and COP26 was held in England. And of course, it was a remarkable gathering for the countries in this in Glasgow, I think, in 2021. And of course, all the countries was looking for the new conference will be held in Sharm el-Sheikh in COP27. And of course, I think Egypt took a very good place between those two great conferences into COP26 and COP28. Of course, COP27 was the conference of the dream, how to collect funds to achieve the goals of saving the consequences of climate change and how to gather all these efforts to decrease the temperature of the the Earth 1.5 degree, and of course all these slogans or all these demos for the COP27, I think it was very successful, and it proved the role of Egypt for leading these projects and these objectives. On the other hand, as you said, the foreign policy of Egypt and how to serve these successful movements in the field of environment, Egypt proved for many years that it had a very strong and very heavy military troops that can be successful for any missions that they can achieve. And of course, the foreign policy, on the other hand, is the soft power or the smooth one that can enter any relation in a peaceful way, in a friendly way, in a very cooperative way, besides this military power and the military force here in Egypt that can push and support this foreign policy. Of course, if you have this complete equation for any international relation, of course you will be a place of confidence, a center of attention, a place that everyone wants to cooperate with.
How do you think Egypt managed through the COP27 and through the communiques and the decisions that were made during the COP27 to be reducing the negative implications of the climate change over the next decade, for example, or for the next years?
Climate change, of course, is a very great and universal and international problem. And of course, COP27 only cannot be the only point to solve all these problems. But the very successful and very clear and obvious point in the COP27 that the harmony that Egypt proved for cooperation between all the facilities and all the governments that can serve the topic of climate change or saving the environment. It was a great cooperation between the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Scientific Research, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Tourism, and of course all these activities, even it can be firstly mentioned that they are far from each other, but of course COP27 collaborate all these ministries and all these ways of cooperation under one umbrella that prove to all the world that it's not a mission of a certain facility or a certain sector to secure or to save the environment. Of course, it needs a cooperation from all these activities and all these specifications. And of course, on the other hand, or in the international field, it needs also a cooperation between all the countries, the developed one and the developing ones, the rich countries and the poor ones, the great countries and powerful countries, and also the weak ones, to achieve these goals of climate change, and of course which is one of the sustainable development goals of the United Nations, as we mentioned.
And for the same aim, for the same goal to be reaching it, but within Egypt or within the region, how do you see the renewable energy projects that were held and constructed in the past few years to be serving the same aim?
Of course, it must be mentioned that discovering or looking for new renewable sources of energy is not the termination or the end of this journey, but of course having new investments and having new opportunities for foreign investments and new projects, even great investments, and also the small and micro enterprises. This will make a continuous need for these renewable sources of energy, even to fulfill the needs of these projects or these investments here in Egypt. And of course it will be a great achievement and a great successful steps on the way to save the environment. So as long as you have a very good foreign policy outside your country, as long as you have great and new and effective investments in your country, of course you will find a way to increase these renewable resources of energy, and can be invested to serve the economic side and also the environmental one.
What are the incentives that are being offered by the Egyptian government, by the Egyptian cabinet, for the private sector in specific to be entering this important field, the clean energy, producing clean energy, the smart green projects?
Of course, as I said, the constitutional principles that was the base of new legislations about saving the environment by looking for new renewable sources of energy was translated in many legislations to serve this aim or to achieve this goal.
Yes.
And of course, the law of 2017, the investment law, which was the renewing or the reshaping of the old investment law, gave many incentives for these investments, like reducing the taxes for these investments for the first starting years of these investments and these projects, and of course the permission for the foreign employment to participate here in Egypt, and of course this will make a very good quality for this investment to make an experienced staff to participate in these investments. And of course this law presented a certain support or a certain push from the government, especially for the investments of the environmental friendly projects, like the technology ones, like the agriculture ones, like the any field that is away from carbon emissions, maybe pollution, wastes, any investment that can reduce all these danger and harms for the environment. It was totally supported and totally protected by the new investment of law. So there were many incentives that was presented by the investment law, encouraging these projects from one side, and of course saving the environment and raising the awareness for the individuals and the owners of these investments as well.
Yes, that's a very important equation. How can we unify the goals of the economy and the environment at the same time, to be preserving the environment but not slowing down the economy, because we need more money to be having bigger projects, cleaner projects, smarter projects for the future. We need both at the same time.
Of course, you are right, because the first history of the economic growth was totally related with the industrial revolution. And
yes,
of course, we all knew how the industrial revolution, of course, it pushed many economic systems of many countries, but it transferred many countries to be powerful ones in their economy. But on the other hand, it harmed the environment a lot and give many damages that we are still suffering up till now, from using charcoal, from using carbon emission, from many harms, emissions, and affecting the temperature of the earth. So according to the economic way to raise the development of your economic system, of course you will need some activities or some practice that may harm the environment. The environment, of course, if you have the awareness, if you have the courage of discovering new sources of energy, the courage of discovering new investment or new projects that can serve the environment, depending upon a great awareness for the people to help you in this vision, and of course on the other hand the international cooperation to achieve this. If you have all these steps consequently or with each other, so you can make this equation, as you said, you can save your economy, you can make a progressive economic system, and on the other hand you can preserve your environment, and this will encourage more cooperation, especially in the economic field.
On the other hand, outside of Cairo and the capital and the big cities that we have seen renovation too over the past few years, we have seen Haya Karima, or the Decent Life Initiative, at the same time targeting about 50 million Egyptian citizens living in villages across the Egyptian land or territory. And those villages, how do you see the renewable projects targeting them, those 50 million citizens, about half of the population, the renewable projects going to the villages and targeting them? What is the importance of such an initiative and the step?
Yes, of course. As you said, the initiative of Decent Life or Haya Karima was started in 2021 by the Egyptian government under the sponsorship and the participation of His Excellency Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Yes. Of course, it was very successful for many points. The first one, it was a very great example for encouraging the participation of the private sector and the civil society to participate in these initiatives, targeting the human rights for Egyptians Egyptians. And of course, the second point, it was a widely spreading initiative to serve the Egyptian people in many categories of their lives, like education, like infrastructure, like hospitality, like healthcare, all the services that Egyptians may need outside the great cities, as you said. And the third point, and the important one, that the participation and the activities practiced by the members of this initiative was always keen to be environmental friendly. Of course, using certain substance for constructions, for painting, for the awareness of the friendly or environmental friendly projects in this initiative, and of course the awareness of people how to save these gains from these initiatives. All these points can also had its reaction or its reflection for the environmental saving. And of course this initiative, even it was firstly directed for the human rights of Egyptian, but it can also serve the environmental side saving also.
Yes, and Doctor, finally, how would you see the future vision of the Egyptian economy nowadays, with all the construction work that we have had over the past few years, with the new capital, with the new cities all over the country, with the infrastructure that we have had?
Of course, Egypt nowadays had a new vision differently from the past. In the past, we were looking for the new projects or new sources of energy as a way to increase your income, or to make some activities or of importing or of exporting, just to fulfill your budget or your annual income, and to pass these years and pass this procedure safely for the government and the individual. But of course, nowadays, there is a vision, and there is a plans, and there is a long-term strategies that Egypt can enter till 2030, till 2050, and of course the short-term strategies and the plans was achieved in the last years, even in 4 or 5 years, or starting by a very great project like enlarging for the new Suez Canal, proved that Egypt has now a vision or an agenda, or its plans can be achieved by steps. Yes. And of course, these steps, as you mentioned, having new capital, having new sources of energy, looking for a new way or a new strategy to improve your economy. Of course, this will give a new opportunity or new hope for any participation to empower this economic system, and of course, saving the environment of Egypt.
Yes, Dr. Moataz, that was Zeid, the Professor of Public Law. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on Windows.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And this brings us to the end of Windows for this week. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.